بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على الحسن بن علي بن محمد البر التقي الصادق الوفي النور المضيء خازن علمك والمذكر بتوحيدك وولي أمرك وخلف أئمة الدين الهداة الراشدين والحجة على أهل الدنيا فصل عليه يا رب أفضل ما صليت على أحد من أصفيائك وحججك وأولاد رسلك يا إله العالمين صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. روي عن الإمام أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الزكي العسكري عليهما الصلاة والسلام أنه قال: خصلتان ليس فوقهما شيء الإيمان بالله ونفع الإخوان. On a day of this blessed month of Rabī al-Thānī or Rabī al-Ākhir, and in the city of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, al-Madinah al-Munawwara, the family of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi were blessed with the birth of the 11th Imam of the Imams of the Muslims, and that is al-Imām Abi Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Ali al-Zaki al-Askarī alayhi alaf al-tahiyyati wal-Thana'i wal-salam. This Imam, who was going to take his role as the 11th leader of the Muslims and of all of mankind in representing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This Imam whom Allah Azza wa Jal describes in a divine narration or so-called Hadith Qudsi by saying that this Imam is the one who guides to my path and the one who is the treasurer of my knowledge. Ad-da'i ila sabili wal-khazinu li'ilmi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this Imam as. And so congratulations to you all on this auspicious occasion. And Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, we are here tonight remembering this occasion and remembering the Imam and remembering some of his words of wisdom and his life and legacy, inshaAllah ta'ala. InshaAllah ta'ala, tonight we would like to benefit a drop from an ocean's worth of the wisdom, of the knowledge of this Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, and that is under three categories, inshaAllah ta'ala. The first one being is a short, concise biography of the Imam, especially because al-Imām al-Askarī alayhi salam, his biography is not as known, unfortunately, between the believers. And so inshallah, as a step towards increasing our ma'rifah in the Imam, a short biography about him salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Secondly, we'll be discussing in reference to one of the Imam's narrations, people's understanding towards religion and the difference of opinions that there are with religion and what it's all about and its tenets. And lastly, some stories from the Imam's life, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, that display one of the best characteristics in the eyes of al-Imam al-Askarī alayhi salam that a Muslim or a mu'min can hold, insha'Allah ta'ala. All of that after salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So firstly, with regards to the Imam's birth dates, so the ulama mentioned that it's either in the year 231 or 232 after Hijrah. And with regards to the day and the month, they agree that it's on the Rabī al-Ākhir or Rabī al-Thānī. But there are three main opinions on the exact date, them being the 4th and the 8th and the 10th. And so al-Imam al-Hasan al-Askarī salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi is mentioned especially in the beginning of the month of Rabī al-Thānī. His parents are, for those younger mu'mineen, who is the father of al-Imam al-Askarī alayhi salam? This is, I don't know if it's a Kahoot question or not, but I'm going to ask it. Who is the father of Imam al-Askarī? Anybody know? Going once, going twice? Al-Imām Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hadi salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And his mother, if the first question was difficult, definitely they're not going to get the second question right. His mother is a lady named Lady or Sayyida Salil, or Hadith, according to some different narrations, who was one of the greatest women of her time. And the Imam has words about, Imam al-Hadi has words about his wife, as well as Imam al-Askarī about his mother. Now his children, how many children did the Imam have, and who are those children? Is this a cool question or not? Am I taking all the questions? Okay, does anybody know? Can we get an answer from the children, or from the youth? Yes, he had one child. Who was the child? al-Imām al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan arwahuna lahu al-fida. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So yes, the ulama say that the Imam al-Askarī salawatullahi salamu alayhi only had one child, and he is the Imam of our time, ajalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. Every Imam has certain alqab that he's known by, certain titles he is known by. So for example, al-Imam al-Hasan is known as al-Hasan al-Mujtaba. That's his title, his most famous title perhaps. Al-Imam al-Askarī salawatullahi salamu alayhi, in fact, when we say al-Imam al-Askarī, that itself is one of his titles. He had some titles as well. One of them was as-Samit, perhaps, which means the quiet one. Perhaps because of the conditions he was in, he was not allowed to be as vocal and not allowed to speak as much to people in public. One of them is al-Hadi, the one who guides. And of course the Imam salawatullahi alayhim are all hudat and guides to the religion. One of them is al-Rafiq, the compassionate one. And al-Imam al-Rida salawatullahi salamu alayhi, when he describes the Imam, meaning every single Imam, he says, Huwa al-Abu al-Rafiq. He is the compassionate father of the Ummah. And that's how Imam al-Askarī salawatullahi salamu alayhi was. Al-Zaki, the righteous one. Al-Naqi, the one who is purified. And of course al-Askarī. Why was he called al-Askarī? Because of the city in which he resided, and that was known as al-Askar, and that is Samarra. And Askar, of course, is in reference to military, because it was a military city at the time. Now, that's an interesting thing about each Imam, and how they all have their own titles. In addition to that, the ulama mentioned something even more than that. They say each and every Imam, they had rings that they would wear. And in those rings, they would have things carved or engraved, writings. And so each of them, if you go back and look in the history of the Imams, one of the first things they mention is the rings that he wore, what was written inside of those rings. That's very beautiful. And if you can, that if you're able to get a ring that has aqiq or fayruz or other gemstone that is praised by the Ahlul Bayt, to get some of these writings in them. The Imam, one of the ulama mentioned, he had in one of his rings this line, Subhana man lahu maqalidu samawati wal ardh. Glorified, exalted is the one in whose hands the keys to the heavens and the earth are in. Meaning Allah Azza wa Jal, everything is in his hands. And the second one, according to some ulama, in one of his rings was written, Inna Allah shaheed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all witnessing. Perhaps we can take from just this, the inscriptions in the Imam's rings, that he's referring to the plan of the a'da and of the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, and how they wanted to end the lineage of Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi alayhim and the Imams, yet everything is in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is in His hands. People have their plans, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His own plans. And the Imam al-Askarī himself has a hadith where he was telling some of his companions that the zalama, the oppressors, thought they could cut this lineage. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His own plans. And He does not allow for His nur to be extinguished. And of course, the Imam of our time was born, and he is alive until this day, and he is promised the nasr and victory. Now, about his martyrdom, the main opinion is that it was on which day of which month? It was on the 8th of the month of Rabī al-Awwal. So just about a month ago was the Shahada of al-Imām al-Askarī salawatullahi salamu alayhi in the year 260 after Hijrah. So if you count it, 231 to 232 to 260, 28, 29 years, the Imam salawatullahi salamu alayhi reached his Shahada and returned to his Lord Azza wa Jal. And this is the note before we go on to the main topic, that it is important for us to try and commemorate the Imam's occasions, especially because his birth as well as his Shahada are surrounded by other occasions that perhaps the mu'mineen focused more on. And so for example, with regards to the Imam's birth, some of the mu'mineen were reviving the first narration, the strong narration of the Shahada of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi wa salam alayha, right? And that has its day. That was on the 10th of Rabī al-Thānī, according to some narrations. And then when it comes to his Shahada as well, it is which day? The 8th of Rabī', which is right before the 9th of Rabī', which is Farhat al-Zahra, right? And so we should try that even though these events of the Imam, his birth and his death, are near other events, to give his birth and death not its right, but to give it some recognition and to revive it. And so alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, I would like to commend the mu'mineen who are in charge of holding and gathering and organizing this majlis, that we had the tawfiq and they had the tawfiq to revive this occasion of al-Imām al-Hasan al-Askarī. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala. Inshallah, in that was something for us all to learn from. Now, we would like to talk about something tonight, inshallah, which is based off of one of the ahadith of the Imam al-Askarī salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi. But before we do that, an introduction. Everybody, most people have their own view on what religion is. And this is not just with regards to Muslims and non-Muslims as well. But we see this with Muslims, we see this with Shia, and even people of different faiths. They have their own view on what the essence of religion is, what the priorities of the religion are, and what makes one, for example, a true abider to that religion. Somebody who truly can be called a fill in the blank, a Muslim, a Christian, a Shi'i, right? They have their own view. And so, some of them, you see, for example, prioritize certain things. They say, what's religion all about? Some of them say religion is all about these acts of ibadah, these rituals and these traditional acts of ibadah and worship, such as prayers, such as fasting, reciting the Holy Quran, performing ziyarah, these things that are acts of worship, ibadat. And when we say ibadah, we mean that specific meaning, because ibadah is much more than that. That's, for example, some people, that's what they think. Some people, for them, religion, the essence of it, the most important thing, the thing that if you don't have, you cannot call yourself a Muslim, they say it's political involvement. And that if you say that politics has nothing to do with religion and vice versa, and you're not politically active, then you're not a true Muslim. Okay. Some say social activism, that's the essence of religion, right? And if you don't have that, and the social activism that we especially, promote, then you're not a true Muslim, right? And true Muslim, true Christian, true whatever. Some of them say no, none of these things on the outside. What's important is the inside. And that understanding you have in your heart, in your aql, that connection you have with Allah Azza wa Jal, that's the essence of religion. Some of them, for example, have the akhlaq and morals. Those are, in their opinions, what's really important, what's the really priority, what really is the priority in Islam. But before we look at this and before we see people's opinions, let's take a step back and say, before all of this and above all of this, who knows the religion best? Specifically the religion of Islam, better than Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim. Meaning, if we want to know what religion is truly about, what its core is, what the reality of worship is, what it means to actually be a Muslim or a mu'min, the first and foremost people we have to refer to are the Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim, as they represent Allah Azza wa Jal. This religion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to mankind, who are the ones who held it and spread it and represented it with their words and their actions and their affiliations and morals and day-to-day lifestyle? Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi alayhim ajma'in. And so each Imam has their own words, clarifying some things that we might understand and misunderstand and understand incorrectly. And so, for example, Imam al-Askarī salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi, when it comes to this idea of ibadah, of worship, somebody, if you ask them what is ibadah, he'll say it's ibadah is to be praying on time, praying all of your prayers, praying mustahabbat, fasting the wajib, fasting the mustahab, reciting Quran a lot every day. This is their definition of worship. And Imam al-Askarī salamullah alayhi has something else to say. There's a hadith narrated from the Imam in which he says, لَيْسَتِ الْعِبَادَةُ كَثْرَةَ الصَّلَاةِ وَالصِّيَامِ. Ibadah is not excessive praying and fasting. Okay, Ibn Rasulullah, what is it then? إِنَّمَا الْعِبَادَةُ كَثْرَةُ التَّفَكُّرِ فِي أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. The reality of ibadah and what's truly ibadah and what is the root of all ibadah, it is to think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's matters and affairs and commands and actions. Not tafakkur fillah, we're forbidden from that, to think about Allah's essence. We can understand that as human beings. He says, tafakkur fi amrillah. What does Allah want from us? Why were we even created in the first place? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in this world, He put us in these difficulties, He put us in these circumstances, especially brothers and sisters at times like this. When we're seeing things and reality happening around the world, we're like, where are things going? How is Allah allowing for this to happen? This is how some of us think, right? What does Allah want from us? Does He have a problem? This is how some people think. And some people might not want to face that reality, but this is the reality. This is how people think. What does Allah want from us? Why was I created? Would there have been a difference if I was created and not created? Right? التفكر في أمر الله. The hadith says that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the one who thinks about and contemplates upon where he came from, where he is, and where he's going. And some hadiths say, think about what Allah wants from you. So كثرة التفكر في أمر الله, that's the real ibadah. Because when you know, one of the reasons is this, because when you know why you were sent on this earth, then salah makes sense. Then siyam makes sense. Then these acts of worship make sense. But the person who does these acts of ibadah without understanding, there isn't that true value to them. And so al-Imām al-Sadiq salawatullahi salam alayhi says in a hadith of his, كَانَ أَكْثَرُ عِبَادَةِ أَبِي ذَرْ التَّفَكُّرُ. Abu Dhar, one of the greatest companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what was the most act of worship that he performed? Al-Imām al-Sadiq says it was not fasting, it was not praying, it was not Quran, none of these things, as great as they are. Most of his ibadah was contemplation and thinking. And that contemplation and thinking takes you from one place to a whole other place. Those moments of thinking, didn't they take Al-Hur from where he was to where he ended up being? That's thinking. Not sometimes we get too caught up with the actions, the outside, the apparent of everything. But we don't take a step back and say, why am I doing all of this? What is the purpose of all this? Why am I actually here? What is the benefit of these things? Why do I have to obey Allah Azza wa Jal, right? And you ask these questions and you want to reach the answer. Now you ask them just for the sake of running away from responsibilities, right? So ibadah is an idea. The Imam says this is the correct understanding of ibadah. Another hadith. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Imam says you want to know the most precautious of people, the one who displays the most wara', as they express it in Islam. The Imam says, أَوْرَعُ النَّاسِ مَنْ وَقَفَ عَنْدَ الشُّبْهَةِ. The one who has the most wara', not the one who is always skeptical about things. The one who, when they get to a shubha, something that's not clear to them, they take a step back. Okay, wait. I don't know if this news that I'm hearing is right. Okay, wait. This food, I don't know if the way that I heard it's halal makes it permissible for me to eat from. And so they take a step back. Wait, I don't know in these current events what my responsibility is. You don't take a step back and say, okay, then I don't want to busy myself or bother myself with this, so I'm just going to leave it. Some things you can. Okay, for example, you go to a restaurant, you don't know if it's halal or haram. Okay, take a step back. You don't have to eat from that restaurant, so you can go somewhere else. But some things, you say, oh, I don't know what my responsibility is in salah if I have a doubt, so I'm just going to keep on going with my salah. No, you have to take a step back, understand what your responsibility is. And so you take a step back, and then you go search. Not take a step back, and then take a step back, and then take a step back, and then just your whole life is skepticalism, and that's it. You take a step back because you want to know what your responsibility is, how to go about this thing the right way. That's what the Imam says. أَعْبَدُ النَّاسِ مَنْ أَقَامَ عَلَى الْفَرَائِضِ. You want to know who is the most worshipping of people? The one who fulfills his wajibat. And unfortunately, brothers and sisters, some people, they think that ibadah and seeking nearness to Allah Azza wa Jal, there's like secrets to it, and there's like a mystical way, and there's things that people don't know, and they want to know the secret, the shortcut. The answer is very simple. You have this risala amaliyah that has wajib, haram, mustahab, makruh. This wajibat mentioned in it, you do it. This is it. It might be better for some people to hear and to accept, because these things, they require for me to actually sit down and learn, and I have to care about my prayers and fast and whatnot. But you want to be a habit of Allah, this is how you do it. The Imam continues, أَزْهَدُ النَّاسِ مَنْ تَرَكَ الْحَرَامِ. The most ascetic of people, the one who has the most zuhd, is not the one who says, I'm not going to have any money, I'm not going to have any wealth, I'm not going to have a nice life. The one who avoids haram, he is zahid. You see how there's things that we think of in a certain way, and we have a certain definition to them, but the Imam has another definition to them. And lastly, the Imam says, أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ اجْتِهَادًا مَنْ تَرَكَ الذُّنُوبِ. The one who puts the most effort in this dunya in the correct cause is the one who avoids sin. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so now we get to the hadith that we mentioned in the beginning. خصلتان ليس فوقهما شيء al-Imām billah wa naf'u al-Ikhwan. The Imam says two characteristics. There's no characteristics better than them. Number one, Iman billah, to have faith in Allah Azza wa Jal. And Iman billah, true Iman and faith in Allah, entails Iman in the Prophet and the Prophets of Allah and the Imams and Qiyamah and the Quran. All of those come back to Allah Azza wa Jal one way or another. وَنَفْعُ الْإِخْوَانِ, to benefit and to help and to be there for the brothers. Brothers, the Imam is referring to here, the brothers and of course as well sisters in faith. Meaning, if you want to know what it means to be a Muslim or a mu'min in the eyes of Imam Askarī alayhi salam, these two characteristics you have to try and make sure that you have them. That my beliefs in Allah Azza wa Jal, my beliefs in the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, are they strong? Are they firm? Are they based off evidence? Do I care about them? If I have questions and details about Allah or about Tawheed or about the Prophet or about the Imam and about the Quran, do I put the effort in trying to get those questions answered or not? That's when it comes to our beliefs. The Imam secondly says, and to benefit and to be there for the mu'mineen. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says, خِدْمَةُ الْمُؤْمِنِ لِأَخِيهِ الْمُؤْمِنِ دَرَجَةٌ لَا يُدْرَكُ فَضْلُهَا إِلَّا بِمِثْلِهَا. This khidmah, this service of a mu'min to his fellow believing brother or sister, it places them in a level, you cannot reach that level unless you do the same thing. Meaning this maqam in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal, no matter how much you pray, no matter how much you fast, no matter how much you do these mustahabbat things, you're not going to reach that level unless you do the same thing and you are there for your fellow believing mu'mineen and mu'minat. Al-Imam Sadiq salawatullahi salam alayhi explains and says, Al-mu'minuna khadamun ba'dhum li ba'd. The believers are servants of each other. One of his companions said to him, وَكَيْفَ يَكُونُونَ خَدَمًا بَعْضُهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ. How can they be serving one another? Are they like one of them is the master, one of them is the slave? In that sense, the Imam responded, يُفِيدُ بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا, that they benefit each other and they help each other. And this help, it can be financial help, it can be emotional help, it can be help with advice, it can be help with education. Somebody doesn't know something, there's a certain hukum or mas'ala or ruling or something that's important to them, you teach them. They're in need of advice, you give them advice. They want to buy a house, they want to go move to a certain place, they want to take a career, you give them advice if you have and if you can and if you're knowledgeable about that. Emotional. Sometimes brothers and sisters, some of the mu'mineen, some of the mu'minat are struggling. And just if they had somebody they could speak to, it would move a lot of that pain and difficulty from them. And often, they're not going to say anything. But the mu'min, he doesn't wait for somebody to tell him, I need your help, to go and help him. You see, this person is off. This person is not the same as they always are. You ask them privately, are you okay? Is there something I can help you with? Right? Financial as well. Those brothers and mu'mineen and mu'minat who have financial abilities to help out those in need. These are all ways that the mu'mineen can benefit each other. And why is that so important? And what makes this important? It's because of the wilayah that they share together. That the strongest connection and the strongest identity and the realest one and the one that's the most authentic is that identity of the wilayah of Allah and the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. That brings people the closest together. Because you might be from different ethnicities, might be from different countries, but these are all things that don't have actual importance. Yani when it comes to heaven and hell and akhirah and the eyes of Allah, He's not going to say, what race are you? What's actually important is your belief. And that wilayah that you share with the mu'mineen. You all believe in Allah, you all believe in the Prophet, you all believe in Ahlul Bayt. That brings you together, and therefore you have responsibilities towards each other first and foremost. We have responsibilities towards non-Muslims, towards non-Shia, and towards others, even people who are not Ahlul Kitab. But there's nothing like the responsibility and the rights of the mu'min on each other, one of them on the other. And so al-Imām al-Hasan al-Askarī salawatullahi salam alayhi teaches us this, and we'll mention some stories from his life, and inshallah we'll end with them. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I didn't ask how much time I have. Right now it's 27 minutes. How much more do I have left? على راحتي? Okay, we're going to be here for another 2 hours. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. One day, a man by the name of, or his title was Abu al-Abbas, Muhammad ibn al-Qasim, one of the companions of Imam Askarī salawatullahi salamu alayhi, was sitting with the Imam. It seemed like the Imam had a class or a majlis or something. And so he was speaking. This man got thirsty, as we just saw a bit ago. One of the mu'mineen helped one of the mu'mineen with his thirst. He got thirsty, but he said, I was so keen on listening to the words of the Imams, I didn't want to get up and get some water and miss some of the words of the Imam. The narrator says, وَلَمْ تَطِبْ نَفْسِي أَنْ يَفُوتَنِي حَدِيثُهُ. My nafs, my soul was not okay with me leaving and missing some of the words of the Imam. So I didn't say anything. وَصَبَرْتُ عَلَى الْعَطَشِ. I was patient with this thirst. This man says that the Imam al-Askarī salamullah alayhi قطع الكلام. He stopped talking. He paused and he told his servant, يا غلام اسقي أبا العباس ماءً. Abu al-Abbas, this companion of mine, he's thirsty. Give him some water. Something simple like that. But some of us may think the Imam stopped his whole class just to get his servant to give water to somebody, because this person is a mu'min and he was in need of something as small as that. That's one. Now how did he know? Was it his ghaibi knowledge? Was it because it was clear he was thirsty? That's something else. But the Imam says, give him water. And so he did. That's the first story. Second story. One day, a man, one of the companions of the Imam by the name of Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari, a very famous companion of al-Imam al-Askarī, perhaps the most famous of his companions. He says that I was in a financial difficulty and I wanted to request some help from Imam al-Askarī alayhi salam. But he says I was embarrassed too, and I was ashamed to go and ask the Imam why. Perhaps it could be that he had already asked him for help. Perhaps it could be he thinks that the Imam doesn't have money to help him. Perhaps. Or it could be just because he's the Imam, and when you're faced someone like that, you can't ask them for things like that. You just don't feel right asking them for money or for help. You just think that the only thing you can do is just say salam to them and respect them and leave. But the Imams weren't like that. Some people, when they get certain political power or certain status in society, that's it. You have to talk to them, make an appointment 3 months in advance. But the Imams themselves, with their great status in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal, were the most humble of people. And they were the most accessible of people. This man, Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari, he says, I wanted to ask the Imam for help, but I was too embarrassed. So I went back home. He says, as I got home, one of the servants of al-Imam al-Askarī salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi approached me with 100 golden dinar. And he gave me with that a letter. Written on it was the following: إذا كانت لك حاجة فلا تستحي ولا تحتشم واطلبها فإنك ترى ما تحب إن شاء الله. He says, oh Abu Hashim, I'm sending you this money, and if you ever need something from me, don't be embarrassed to ask. Don't be shy to ask. And ask it from me, and inshallah you'll see what you like. This is how accessible the Imams were. This is how keen they were on helping the fellow believers and mu'mineen and mu'minat. One story, al-Imam al-Askarī salawatullahi salamu alayhi, at his time was a poet, a famous poet who worked for the government. But perhaps this poet was a mu'min and a muwali, because as we know in history, sometimes the Imams had certain people working for them in the government undercover, right? And this is a whole topic which can be discussed in classes and classes. He says that one day my wife gave birth to a son, to a boy. But of course, a child needs clothes, it needs stuff to take care of it, right? It comes with some costs itself, right? And he says, I wasn't in a good financial situation at the time. So I wrote to some of my friends, asking them for help. Can you help me? Help. I need some money, I need some support. None of them answered, and none of them gave him help. And so, anybody who had the tawfiq of being with Ahlul Bayt knows that that house is the most generous of houses. That home of the Prophet ﷺ, if you need help, that is the first house you have to go. And even now, brothers and sisters, those who have hajat, those who have needs, before everything, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, and you will see what you like. And so he says, I went to Imam al-Askarí's home, but again, this person, he said, I'm too embarrassed to ask him. So he said, I'm going to start walking around his home. And if he sees me, he'll get the idea and he'll help me. And so he was walking, he said, and the Imam sent out one of his companions to the door, and he gave him a pouch of 400 silver dirham, silver coins. And then he told him, يَقُولُ لَكَ سَيِّدِي, my master, al-Imām al-Askarī salawatullahi wa salam, says to you, أَنْفِقْ هَذِهِ عَلَى الْمَوْلُودِ بَارَكَ اللَّهُ لَكَ فِيهِ. Take this money and use it on that child that was just born. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you through this child of yours. These stories, sometimes we mention them to show the point of how the Imam had unseen knowledge. True. But there's also a big lesson in there, how the Imam was so keen on being there for the mu'mineen and mu'minat that were in need of help. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Lastly, inshallah, there's this last story which is incredible, honestly. I read it and I read it and I read it and it's unbelievable. Al-Imām al-Askarī salamullah alayhi quotes or has a narration from him, and then he reads the story about this topic. He says, أعرف الناس بحقوق إخوانه وأشدهم قضاء لها أعظمهم عند الله شأنه. You want to know the greatest person in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal? He is the one who knows the rights of his brothers and sisters in faith and tries his or her best to fulfill their rights and to fulfill their needs. This is أعظم الناس عند الله شأنا. ومن تواضع في الدنيا لإخوانه فهو عند الله من الصديقين. And whoever is humble to his brothers and sisters in faith, is humble towards them in this dunya, then he is one of the siddiqeen in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal. Meaning those siddiqeen whom we mention in the Holy Quran and the Ahadith, فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِم مِّنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ وَحَسُنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. The Imam says one of the types of these siddiqeen are those who are so keen on knowing the huquq of their brothers and sisters in faith and fulfilling them. وَمِن شِيعَةِ عَلِيِّ بْنِ أَبِي طَالِبٍ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ حَقًّا. And this person, this type of person, is truly one of the Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi ta'ala alayhi. Now, the Imam has a story to tell us from Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says one day, Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi was sitting at his home along with his son Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, and the Imam says two brothers of the Imam entered his home. A father and a son, meaning these brothers are not brothers, biological brothers, they are brothers in faith. And so the Imam says, Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi got up for them. He made room for them. He sat them down in his room and he sat in front of them. Just that itself is mind-boggling. Amir al-Mu'mineen gets up from his spot. He takes these two people, these two mu'mineen, doesn't mention who they are, if they have a high reputation in society, no. He takes them, he places them down and has them sit down in his spot, and he sits in front of them on the ground. And then he orders for Qambar to bring them some food. And so they bring the food. Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi hosts them with this food. They eat, they all eat together. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen says to Qambar, go and bring a briq, so like some container of water, and bring a towel and bring a bowl so they can wash their hands. Because they didn't have sinks and faucets and whatnot at the time. So go bring a towel, go bring a canteen of water, go bring a bowl so they can wash their hands after having eaten this food, right? And so Qambar goes and brings them and comes back. The hadith says, فَوَثَبَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. Wathab means like he got up in a rush. Not فَقَامَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَذَهَبَ إِلَىٰ قَمْبَرٍ. He rushed to it. He rushed to him. He took the ibriq, he took the water canteen, he took the dish and he took the towel. And he started to try and wash their hands for them, or to put the water on them, on their hands so they can wash them. This man, once he saw this, the father, he started with the father, the hadith says, فَتَمَرَّغَ فِي التُّرَابِ. He, as a sign of humility towards the Imam, he put his face in the dirt and saying, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, can it be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees me and you're serving me like this? I'm not going to allow that. Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi ta'ala alayhi says to him, أَقْعُدْ وَاغْسِلْ. Sit down, wash your hands as I pour the water above them. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ يَرَاكَ وَأَخُوكَ الَّذِي لَا يَتَمَيَّزُ مِنْكَ وَلَا يَتَفَضَّلُ عَلَيْكَ يَخْدِمُكَ. Sit down and wash your hands so that Allah Azza wa Jal sees you and your brother, meaning me, serving you, and he has no virtue above you in the sense that you are his brother in faith. Correct, he is your Imam, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also expects from me to serve the mu'mineen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see me in this state, washing your hands. And the Imam says to him, and I also have my wishes from Allah Azza wa Jal in the akhirah, and I know He will give me back for this. And then the Imam says to him, أقسمت عليك بعظم حقي الذي عرفته وبجلته. I swear to you by my haqq that you know, allow me to do this for you. And so the man at this point says, okay. Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi ta'ala alayhi continues to pour the water on the hands of this man until he finishes washing. And then he takes this canteen of water and gives it to who? Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. He says to him, Ya Muhammad, had it not been that this son came with his father, I would have washed his hands. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like for me, the father, to wash the son's hands and not stick with just washing the father's hands. Meaning what? I, the father, I'm going to wash the father's hands, and you, my son, are going to wash his son's hands. قال يأبى الله أن يسوي بين ابن وأبيه إذا جمعهما مكان. As great as this brother is, this son is, he's a brother in faith, but I'm not going to treat him the same way while his father is there. So I will wash the father's hands and you wash the son's hands. And so it was. He washed, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya washed the hands of the son of that woman. Who is this mu'min? Was he somebody famous? None of it is mentioned. The Imam says a fellow mu'min, brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen, came along with his son and entered. Now, that's the story in mind. And then Imam al-Askarī ends with this. فَمَنِ اتَّبَعَ عَلِيًّا عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ عَلَى ذَلِكَ فَهُوَ الشِّيعِيُّ حَقًّا. Whoever follows Amir al-Mu'mineen in this, in serving the mu'mineen, he is a true Shi'i. Do you see how important this thing is now? That this essence of being a servant of Allah Azza wa Jal and a true Muslim and a mu'min, how the Imam salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi emphasizes it. And to conclude, and I've taken your time, and inshallah we're excited to hear the poetry about Imam al-Askarī alayhi salam and participate in the kahoot. Participation is also only 60 and above can participate, or no, everybody can participate? Everybody, inshallah. We'll end here, inshallah. How great would it be if we were to live our lives until we see Allah Azza wa Jal and unite with Him in the akhirah, not see Him. Unite with Him and return to Him, having tried in this dunya to understand His religion correctly and tried to implement it. And how unfortunate would it be if we were to live our whole life having our own ideas of what Islam is all about and not putting the efforts in to try and understand it more and understand it better, let alone implement it correctly. And the only way to solve this is through education, brothers and sisters, education and dua. And so you contemplate upon the Quran, contemplate upon the words of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam, connect with the ulama, you ask them questions that you have, attend these majalis. Insha'Allah ta'ala, we have with this the hope that we are able to understand Islam correctly, and to be amongst those people that can say to Allah, Ya Rabb, in this life that passed, we tried to understand your religion as best as we could, and we tried our best to implement it, Ya Rabb, the rest is in your hands. And we want to be amongst those that al-Imām al-Askarī salamullah alayhi says about فَمَنِ اتَّبَعَ عَلِيًّا عَلَى ذَلِكَ فَهُوَ الشِّيعِيُّ حَقًّا. Isn't it our dream to be true Shia, to be true muwaleen and mu'mineen? Insha'Allah ta'ala, with our efforts in trying to implement this, and with the barakah of this majlis, insha'Allah, we are able to reach that level. هذا وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطاهرين.